All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to try to review everything that we can that you have questions about. We're going to start with the ones that are up on the top, but other than that, if you have any questions, ask me. We're going to focus on these. If you all of a sudden say, I've suddenly had an idea of something I want to ask, just ask, and we'll try to get through it. We have about 20 or so minutes until the end of lunch, so we'll try to get through as much as we can, okay? So kind of as a brief overview of this sheet, if you're not in my class. So the days 1, 2, and 3. Day 1 is period 1. So if you're one of the studiers who likes to relate it to the periods in history. And then days 2 and 3 are period 2. Revolutionary War is part 1 of period 3. And then period 3 ends in 1800 with the creation of the Constitution and federalism and things like that. Okay. So we're going to start right up here with a couple of the different terms that you might end up seeing on on my quiz or the AP exam. Okay, so we're going to start early, and then we'll go later. So the different Native American tribes. So these are 4 different areas of the Native American tribes. The most important ones that you will need to know are the East Coast tribes, in particular the Iroquois. So important things to know about the Iroquois, and by the way, some people find it helpful to have maybe a sheet of paper to write some of this stuff down. If that's helpful to you, that's up to you. But the Iroquois Confederacy, or the Iroquois tribes, remember that's going to be that group of 5 tribes that are going to come together into one large joint confederation that continues to exist until today. Now that confederation, if you were in my class, you read like the Law of Great Peace. The idea was to come together as one for peace, help each other in warfare, alliance systems, things like that. So the Iroquois are going to be probably the most crucial out of all the Native American tribes from the early Native Americans. Another East Coast tribe you might hear of is the Mahokia, Mahokia. Those are the Mound Builders. So if you learned about the people who were building the large mounds to get up to the gods, that's the Cahokia. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah? Okay. So the Mound Builders are going to be the ones, a lot of the times in the Mound Builders, they're either referenced just as a general Native American sourcing. They won't ask a lot of specifics about the Cahokia. They'll ask a lot more about the Iroquois. But the only thing that you might see is religion, because their mounds were built to get closer to the gods. So you may see a religion question on the AP exam. Moving over into the second most important, it's going to be the Southwest tribes, in particular the Anasazi. Anasazi. Okay, Anasazi. So the Anasazi are going to be the ones that are going to be the Pueblos. So if you've heard of the Pueblo people, that's actually a break off from the Anasazi. Remember the Anasazi, the big one is going to be irrigation systems. So they're going to be the ones that are going to create the major irrigation in the Southwest, which is going to be able to create permanent farming. Remember, there's one really, really important crop that the Anasazi are going to create, which is what? Maize. Yep, M-A-I-Z-E. So maize is going to be that really important crop. And part of the reason they can now grow it and become a permanent settlement is due to irrigation. So most of the things that you will see for the Anasazi are going to be the irrigation systems. Or the Pueblo builders, because they're able to adapt and create permanent settlement without wood. Okay? The other 2 that you may see, we have the Great Basin tribes, which is Utah. The biggest thing about that, think Utah is a desert. Utah, you can't make permanent settlements. There's no permanent water sources. So you have to move around where the food moves around. And then the West Coast tribes are going to also be movers, because they're going to move based on the fish. And they're going to be moved based on the deer and the elk. So it's going to be very mobile. So Great Basin and the West are mobile tribes, whereas the East Coast, and the Southwest are going to be more permanent tribes. Does that clarify questions about the Native Americans? Most of what you will see on the exam are going to be very broad. So for example, what are similarities between the tribes? So that's an idea of similarities in religion. Your whole environment revolves around religion. Similarities of trade networks with each other. Only fighting if you need warfare. need land, through warfare. You might see those. A lot of religion. So if you see anything about Native Americans, make sure you connect it to religion and also families. Yes. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and say this one's done.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And if you're not, you raise your hand. Okay. So now we're going to head into the colonies. So we will start with ways to come over. Okay. So we'll start with joint stock because that's going to be the most popular. When you think joint stock, think companies and richness. They're going to be investors in England that are going to pay for you to come over as an investment company to be able to come over and make money. This is going to be especially through at first gold, and then later on it's going to be especially through plantations. Think South. Most of these joint stock companies are going to go to the South. The most famous of which is going to be the Virginia Company. It's not Virginia Companies, it's only one Virginia Company. But the Virginia Company is going to fund that expedition to Jamestown. The intent was to find gold. That was the original intent. But it's going to move south, and then what state do you think was named after the Virginia Company? Virginia. Don't say West Virginia. West Virginia doesn't exist until after the Civil War, and we'll actually talk about why. But anyway, so the Virginia Company is going to fund that. It's a lot of South. So think big corporations, big plantations, big investment companies. On the other side, and it's not on here, but I just want to mention it, you have a proprietary colony. So proprietary colonies are going to be individual people wanting to come over. They pay their own way. They're going to create their own states and own government systems by coming over. This is going to be the middle colonies as well as the northern colonies. And the last one is the headright system, which we kind of glanced over in my class. But a headright system, basically, it was a way to pay for you to come over. This was especially common with the proprietary colonies to get people to come over. So what they would do is they would actually give you free land based on the people in your family by head. So if you were a male, you received typically 100 acres. If you were a female, you received 50. And if you were a child, you received 25. So basically that caused families to move over into the northern and middle colonies. They've only asked it a few times in the AP exam. And they won't ask it on a DBQ anymore because of the rewrite. So what happened is, actually my DBQ caused this change because when I took the DBQ, the question was all the way on Puritan America, the entire DBQ. The problem with that is that the most schools actually teach that in the summer as summer reading. So 25% of your exam score was based on what most people learned in the summer beforehand. Everybody failed. It was one of the worst scores in AP history. And so they actually made it so your DBQ will only start at American Revolution. And it will end in 1980. They won't do any of the early and they won't do any of the very late. Because too many kids failed. They might still ask an LEQ, but you can always choose with the LEQs. Alright. Okay, so then we're going to get into colonial life. So, Christian duty. Christian duty is the idea that Christians were predestined by God to come west and come into the Americas. God has designed you to come over and create the great American colony. It is the very Christian way to go, whether it be Puritan, separatist, or traditional Christianity, which is called Protestantism. Now, this Christian duty really starts a lot of this idea. It's a very big similarity, by the way, with the Spanish of the idea that God has designated you to colonize and convert people. It's also the idea that we should convert Native Americans to Christianity. But this Christian duty is also going to come with John Winthrop. So think John Winthrop, City Upon the Hill. America should be the most important colony in the world, and God has designated it as such. Okay. Then, Anglich Ization. So this right here is the idea that the British colonies want to be just like England. So in the Americas, you want to act just like they do in Britain. You're going to dress the same, attempt to keep their same accents. You're going to drink tea. You're going to do everything that the British does because in your mind, you are British. Now, the closer we get to the revolution, the less people want to be like the British. You start to become your own colony, your own people. So it's kind of like, for example, when a new high school is built, right? New high school is built, let's say right next to Skyline. A bunch of people go over there. Most of you are probably going to act like you did at Skyline. You might have the same cheers, the same people on your football team, because that's the way that you were. As you begin to transition and change and more people come to the school, 20, 30 years, you're going to be your own individual school and not the same as others. Back when my high school split, we always had this huge rivalry with this neighboring school all the time. Now that it's been 8, 9 years since I've graduated, now they have a new rivalry. They don't even care about our school anymore. And so, yeah, it hurts my feelings. But everything's different now, right? As time moves on, people change and create their own cultures. So we move away from this as we move further away from colonization. Okay, so these kind of all go together. Okay? So Glorious Revolution and Age of Enlightenment happen about the same time. A little bit different though. Glorious Revolution is probably normally put to be about 1400-ish through about 1700. It's a rather large period of time. Remember, all of this is going to be religion, and in particular, the lessening of religion in the colonies and in England. So this is where, for example, the divine right of kings goes away. So now you have more emphasis on the prime minister rather than having it be on the king. No longer is the king designated by God. It is now designated by heredity. Okay? So we have a lessening of religion. This is part of the reason why over in the Americas you have Pennsylvania, where most people are Quakers, or different things like that, which we will talk about in my class more with the Second Great Awakening. But this is why you have more individual freedoms in the Americas compared to over in England. And England is still very sectionalized into the Church of England. That's why it's required by law that every monarch be part of the Church of England. Whereas in America, we have so many different religions in this country. The Age of Enlightenment is going to be from about 1500 to 1700. And this is going to be science. So these kind of go along with each other because as we begin to have more science, think Galileo, thinking of the sun as the center of the universe instead of the earth being the center of the universe, transferring into that's why religion is not as important because we have science and reasoning. Yeah?
What's the difference between the Glorious Revolution and the Great Awakening?
Well, and I'll explain that just right now. So Great Awakening is going to be only in America. So this is going to be in America. It is from 1606, which is colonization, to 1776, because we're too busy with the war. And this is going to be religious revival. So this is the idea that now you want to be part of religion. So Great Awakening and the Glorious Revolution are exact opposites of each other. Glorious Revolution lessens the importance of religion. The Great Awakening is going to revive it and say now we have to be religious. A lot of this comes from the idea of sermons. It comes from the idea that we need to hurry and be saved. This is the idea of the halfway covenant of everybody needs to figure out a way to go to heaven instead of hell. Examples like that. Somebody give the time really quick.
57.
Great. Hi. Okay. So everybody understand the difference between these three? Glorious, Great Awakening, and Age of Enlightenment? Most of the time with Age of Enlightenment, this is going to be seen on a question on the American Revolution. And then these two, Great Awakening and Glorious Revolution, are going to be religion questions. Age of Enlightenment, you're especially going to see this with John Locke. The idea that reasoning needs to be used in the government system. Yes, transitioning. Okay, so now we're going to transition into revolts. Okay, we're going to start with King Philip's War, also known as the Pequot War. Okay, King Philip's War is very unlikely to be seen on the AP exam, so just be aware of that. But basically, this is going to be a conflict with Native Americans and white settlers. So remember, we've already had the proclamation line, right? This is going to be the major conflict that's going to kind of happen around that time. So we have white settlers wanting to move west. We have Native Americans who feel like this is not going to be good for us and we don't want this. And it's going to cause a massive war because of this. So if you were in my class, this was the one where we talked about the natives surrounded that fort and then shot all the people dead. Basically, the solution to this was combining the tribes and the white settlers through mestizo populations. So we're basically going to become really good friends by becoming family with each other. And basically what happens is we agree we're both going to live there and become one tribe, one colony. We're going to live in the same place, and it causes a massive upswing of mestizo populations. Highly unlikely you'll see it on the AP exam, though. Hey, review session.
What is this?
Review. You ask me that every time I have a review session. You're like, what are all these people here?
History club or...
Oh, I wish I had this many people in history club.
Is it history club?
There is a history club. It starts up in 2 weeks.
Probably everyone on Ray Club.
Yeah. See ya.
I'll never talk to you.
Okay, so, what, for joining history club?
No.
Okay. History club is fun. Thank you. We have treats. Yeah, see? Also competing for several $1,000s of scholarships and a chance to go to nationals in a competition. Yeah, cool. All right, anyways. Okay, so we'll do our last two, and then we'll take some final questions. Okay, so the first one, effect of the 7 Years' War on colonist natives in England. This is very important. One of the major causes, in fact, this is more of a historical context, and then the causes are the effects on the colonist natives in England. So, 7 Years' War on the colonists. Lots of things. Number one, restriction of land use. No longer can you go west of the Appalachian Mountains. That is through the proclamation line of 1763. Massive increase of debt, national debt. In order to pay off that, they're not going to increase their taxation because of that. And then you have all the things that kind of follow that. Natives or colonists also feel like we weren't the ones wanting to fight this war. We weren't even in the Ohio River Valley very much. You wanted that land, they wanted that land, and you're expecting us to pay for it. Also, the colonists were the only ones who had to pay for this war. The English citizens, as well as all the other colonies in the world, did not have to pay for this war. Only the colonists, because they felt like it helped them the most, even though, according to that line, they weren't allowed to settle in the Ohio River Valley. They don't settle into the Ohio River Valley after, but even though we claim that, the colonists are now going to have it, mostly because they say we protected you from the natives, so you have to pay us back. And this, by the way, is in the several trillions of dollars of debt. It's a lot. Effects on England. England is massive national debt. Colonies begin to become a nuisance because now they're going to whine and complain about the taxation. This is actually a really big deal because most overlord countries, like the head of the colonizers, don't want a colony that's going to make a big deal. They'd rather get rid of it than make it a whole thing. It's part of the reason why if you get robbed and you say something or yell at them, they'll oftentimes run away, simply because of the fact that they don't want conflict. They don't want to deal with people in large groups. They just want an easy grab. That's the thing with England. England wants an easy grab. They don't want something that's going to give them trouble, and if they do, they're going to release it. They really still thought that the gold was still in America. It's part of the reason they hung on so long. Effect on the natives, it's actually positive at first, because they have the proclamation line. Most of the native tribes that are going to be important in the Americas are going to keep their trade networks, but they are going to lose it with France. So now they're going to be a little bit more strict on those trade networks. However, as we know, people did not follow the proclamation line of 1763. So as people continue to move west, we have conflict. A really great example of that is going to be the Paxton Boys. So as you know, with the Paxton Boys, these were the guys west of that line that are going to be forced out. And on their way to the East Coast, they're going to take several Native Americans, kill them along the way, drag them to the center of Philadelphia, and say, this is what you get when you tell us we can't live on our land. Okay? And the last one that's on this board, and then we'll open it up for questions, is Somerset. If you are in my 3B, you're learning this today, so if this doesn't sound familiar to you, I'm sorry. Somerset decision is going to be by England. Basically, there's going to be a slave in the Caribbean who comes back to England after being freed. They basically are going to say to him, you're not really free, you're still a slave because you're black. He sues in their version of the Supreme Court, and it's confirmed that it is unconstitutional from their constitution to have slavery. It ends slavery in the United States. Well, not in the United States, excuse me. It ends slavery in England. Slavery still exists in the United States, but England is going to use it as a war tactic by saying, if you fight for us, then we will free the slaves. And if England wins, there'll be no more slavery in the colonies. It causes a lot of African Americans to switch and become loyalists and to fight in the Revolutionary War. However, it also kind of takes away all those slaves from the southern plantation colonies. So then the economies are going to go completely down in the South, and it's going to ruin their economy to the point that some of them don't even think that they can continue fighting because they need their money back from the slaves. Yeah?
I have a question. Who is Olada Equiano?
Olato Equiano, he is going to be a sourcing for the Middle Passage. So remember, he's that slave that was freed, and then he could write, so he wrote about his experience on the Middle Passage, and then we did that whole boat thing. Just think boat thing with him, and you'll be just fine, because that's really what he's known for, is describing the Middle Passage. Okay, so we've covered everything on the board. Questions from you guys. Quaylen.
Isn't the age of enlightenment, like, isn't the Great Awakening happening after the age of enlightenment not corrected? Because it's like, here's all this science, and then they're like, screw the science, now we're going to have religion.
Well, that happens all the time in American history, though. Anytime that science gets really revved up, religion is going to get revved up too, saying the science is wrong. Same thing happened in the 1950s. In the 1940s, we have the creation of vaccines, surgical things that are new. People begin to say science is what's causing people to be born, and we have x-rays that can now determine, okay, there's other things going on instead of just God saying you now have a magical baby. And so what happens is in the 1950s, everyone goes back to church because science is ruining it all. And that actually happens nowadays as well. So for example, stem cell research, or also going into cloning, when that rose up in the 2000s, so did religion, saying this is anti-God. Yeah, so it actually coincides. Anybody else have any questions? You're all packing away, so that's not good. Okay. Well, if you have any individual questions, come chat with me individually. And good luck.